Hi everybody, and welcome to my second of two videos on the Nikon N70. This video is going to be very in-depth. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at this LCD panel and figuring out what the heck all of those squares in that arch mean. And what do these symbols along the top mean? And that's a whole lot of buttons for this camera. What do they do? So we're going to talk about that, but before we get there, we're going to start with a few more basic elements. First is going to be mounting and unmounting your lens. This has a Nikon F mount. There's a button right here on this side that you use to mount and unmount. This is the release. So to unmount your lens, you push this down and then rotate clockwise about a quarter turn, and then you can take your lens off. To put it on, you line up the focus line right there, that white line, with this white dot you can see right by my thumb, and turn it counter or anti-clockwise until it clicks. Here's that sound again. And when it clicks, you can see the lens release button pops up a little bit. That's how you know it's mounted. Now, an AFD or AFS lens will work properly and completely with this camera. You can also mount E-series lenses and other AI lenses without autofocus, but if they don't have electronic contacts like those on the side of the mount there, then they won't actually meter with this camera. Like I promised in the first video, I'm going to show you a trick that will allow you to meter with this camera. Now here's why they don't meter. Whenever you use this camera and you're looking through the viewfinder, the aperture is all the way open. So you can set it to whatever aperture setting you want, but it's always going to be open. So the camera meters based on the light coming through the open aperture. When you tell the camera what aperture to shoot at, when you stop the aperture down, then the computer in the camera compensates for that difference in light to come up with a different shutter speed. It's all electronic, and that's why this needs the electronic contacts to meter. These E-series lenses don't have electronic contacts. But I'm going to turn this on. It's on manual. So right now, I'm going to take a picture wide open, and you can see nothing happened. Now I'm going to stop down to f/22 as far as it will go, or f6, yeah, that was f/22. And you can see the aperture closed inside of the lens. So if you have this in aperture priority, let's say, and it's telling you that it's metering the scene and it needs 1/250th of a second. That's 1/250th wide open because the camera cannot communicate with the lens. So if you stop it down from wide open to f11, your image is going to be basically black because it's going to be very underexposed. So how do you meter your lens? How do you get a proper meter reading if your lens isn't talking to your camera? Good question. What I'm about to show you is not something I advise doing, because it is a very good way to accidentally drop your lens and ruin it. So you put it into aperture exposure mode, or aperture priority mode rather, and we'll see how to do that in a minute. Then you set it up to take your meter reading, push the lens release. Oh, and look, as you turn it, oh wait, you're going to take your reading, you set it to the aperture that you want. Then you push your lens release, and as you turn it, you can see that the lens stops down. So if you unmount it about halfway, now noticing that it's not prone to falling off, but it could because it's not locked onto the camera anymore. Now you can get a meter reading for whatever aperture you want. So now you know what your proper shutter speed is at f11, like this. Reconnect your lens, change your shutter, go into manual, change your shutter speed to the correct one, take your picture, and everything will turn out well. You can also do that in manual mode. You don't have to be in aperture priority. You can do that in manual mode and just adjust your shutter speed until the shutter speed and aperture meter properly. But that's the trick. So the next thing we're going to do is change out the batteries. This camera uses two CR123 batteries, and they are in the bottom of the camera right there. And you can see on the bottom it says lithium battery 3 volt times 2, and then on the inside I thought it said what it was. It doesn't say the actual type of battery on the inside. Oh wait, there it is. Then there's a little yellow sticker on the inside there, and that says CR123A or DL123A. Different names for the same thing. So there you go. On the silver cap here, there is a plus, or I'm sorry, there's a minus on the left side and a plus on the right side, and that tells you how to load it. There's also a diagram on the yellow sticker in back. So plus connects here, I'm sorry, minus connects here, plus connects here, close, and it's on, ready to go. That's how you change the batteries on that. Pretty straightforward. You have your flash hot shoe here with your sync ports. It uses X sync at 1/125th of a second. And what that means is that is the fastest shutter speed at which the flash can be used and give you an acceptable result. And the reason is, let's say that this is what you're looking at. And here is your shutter curtain. You're the film right now, you're just waiting for the image the light to come to you so you can record the image. Well, the shutter opens up like this, you get the light, you take the picture, and then a shutter comes up from the bottom. Then they reset. And that's how the shutter operates and keeps light from hitting the film when it's not supposed to. So when you're at 1/125th of a second, shutter opens, there you go, whole film plane is exposed to light, shutter closes, and then they reset. If you're at 1/60th or 1/30th or anything slower than 1/125th, this opens, and there is some amount of time during which the entire film plane is exposed to light. The way that the shutter speed gets longer and shorter is not by the curtains physically moving faster, but by the curtains opening and then the film being exposed for a longer period of time before the second one closes. Now let's say you're going to take a picture at 1/500th. Curtain goes up, and then the trailing curtain comes in some distance behind it. But if you used a flash photo right now, took a flash right now, you'd have only a part of your image that would be illuminated, and the rest of it, where the shutter curtains are, would be black. 1,000th of a second, 4,000th of a second. And so the shutter speed increases not by making the curtains move faster, they always move at the same speed, but by shrinking the gap between the curtains so there's less time for light to actually make it through the curtains and touch the film. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is look at how to load and unload film. So here's my demonstrator roll of ruined film. I'm going to put the camera here like this. I'm going to open up the back, however that opens. There's a button somewhere. There we go. Okay, so now the camera is open. The film goes in here, and the way that it works is you slide it in like by hooking it in and then rotating, and it fits snugly into place. There's a little pin on the bottom here that's springy, and so you want that pin to line up with the opening on your film cassette. It should nest right inside of it. There we go. Put your finger there to hold it in place, pull out a little bit of film, set it there, and the camera's going to do the rest. Turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Why isn't it working? Ah, that's it. Why isn't it working? So once you have your film in, what you do is you take the leader and you just set it right in there. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat just yet. The camera's going to take care of that. Turn the camera on. Push the shutter button. Oh, come on now. Okay, so what I was doing wrong all that time was that I had the ISO set to DX. I had to manually set it. Now it's working like it should. So the way that it works is you just hold this button down or push the button to take a picture. If you have it in a different drive mode, I'll show you that when we go through the screen, then you can just hold it down and take multiple images. If you want to, you can hold both of these down to rewind mid-roll, but I believe it's automatically going to rewind. Let's find out. So when you reach the end of the roll, it does not automatically rewind. It just says end, and then you have to manually force a rewind by holding down the in and the PS buttons. And it'll count down as it rewinds. All right, so here we have the top of the camera. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the buttons over here on the left and the panel are all connected. They work in concert. The screen's functions are operated by the in-out function and set buttons, as well as on the left over here, as well as the PS and meter mode functions on the right. But the function and the set buttons do the heavy lifting. So first thing we're going to do is turn it on. Next, we're going to change the ISO. The ISO can be set manually from a range of 6 to 6400, which is a fairly impressive and large range. And DX mode is also available for automatic setting. You can set the ISO manually if your film doesn't have a DX code on it, or if you want to push or pull process your film. So what you want to do is hold the function button and rotate the command dial to access the ISO slot. Function button, and ISO is all the way over on the right. It's already there. Now, what you want to do is hold set, and you can rotate the command wheel to go, and it goes in a loop, 6400 DX 6 up through the entire range or down through the entire range until you get to the ISO that you want. And so that's how you change your ISO setting. The next is going to be film advance mode. We set the film advance mode by holding function and rotating the command dial until the LCD points at the second slot. Here we go. So we rotate it in the same way that we want the little triangle to move. So rotating the command dial this way causes the triangle to move that way. Rotating it clockwise causes the triangle to move clockwise, which makes total sense. Then the next thing we do is we hold set, and we can change from single to continuous, high, continuous. So I take that, so single frame, continuous low, continuous high, and silent rewind mode. Silent rewind simply reduces the noise and increases the time, I believe, in film rewinding. So there we go. And you can go through it the other way as well. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through each of these 4 advanced modes, and I can show you what they do. Now, when you're advancing the film, single shot and single shot silent sound exactly the same. The only difference is in the rewinding. I'll show you here. This is single. Function to silent mode. Same sound. Move over to low. Now, low advances at 2 frames per second. Then we're going to go over to high. And high is 3.7 frames per second. And so those low and high have very good uses for things like sports, or making sure that you capture as something's coming around and coming into focus, making sure that you get the right image, things like that. Burst mode has a lot of very good uses. The next thing we're going to look at are the AF modes. So we're going to hold function here. We're going to rotate counterclockwise. Now, right now it's set to manual focus. We can also, I have to turn it to AF on the front of the camera first. Now, there we can, now we can change the AF modes. I've owned this camera for 2 years. 2 years I've owned this camera. Okay, so we're going to make sure we're at the AF mode. AFS and AFC are the 2 modes. So AFS is autofocus single servo rather, And what that means is that when you have to press the button, it's going to find something, lock on it, and stay there until you release the button. And you can then take the picture. It will only take a picture if something's in focus. Now, AFC for continuous servo means that as things move around, it will continue to track. All you have to do is keep the button depressed. So different uses for different situations. I happen to like AFS personally because I find AFC sometimes focuses on things I don't necessarily want it to, and because it's constantly searching, it's sometimes unpredictable. And for me, it's more important to have predictability. So the next thing we're going to look at are the modes. So we're going to switch the function button here to where it's flashing at P. I already got there. And our modes are P, S, A, M, and P again. So P is program, S, shutter priority, A, aperture priority, M, full manual. With program, what happens, and then there's also PS mode. So to enter PS mode, you hold down the PS button and rotate the command dial until PS pops up. And PS is the Vario-program modes up along the top. So let's back out of that. We'll get to PS mode in just a minute. Program mode, the way this works is that the computer in the camera has a preset range of functions to obtain an ideal exposure. So it sees how much light is coming in based on your meter setting, whether you're in matrix, center weighted, or spot. And then it says, okay, here's this amount of light going with these preset formulae. It needs this aperture and this shutter speed. Great, and then it takes a picture for you. It takes all the thought out of it. Next mode is S, shutter priority. What that means is that with the command wheel right here, you're going to set the shutter speed, and the camera will automatically pick the proper aperture. So if I take the lens cap off, what you can see is that it's saying f4.8 at 1/250th, f5.6. So as I change the shutter speed, the camera automatically recalculates the correct aperture. Function set over to A, aperture priority. Now I've got the aperture set at f32, and oh yeah, my N70's contacts are shot. So normally you can control the aperture through the aperture control ring by putting stopping your lens all the way down and flipping this little dial, or this little switch, so that it's aligned with the orange line. Now that should work to give you control of your aperture on your N70. But if your N70 is like mine and had a little short at some point in its life, after I got it, unfortunately, then the way to control the aperture is with the aperture ring. So as I change the aperture ring, it's just recognizing that change and recalculating the shutter speed. That's aperture priority. You select the aperture, the camera selects the shutter speed. And in both shutter priority and aperture priority, the camera is programmed to give you a proper exposure based on the settings that you're putting into it, the one setting that you can control. Now if we go over to full manual by hitting function, set, rotate counterclockwise to M, and what you do is you control the shutter speed with the command dial. Here we go. And then you control the aperture with the aperture ring on the lens. And if you have a G lens, my understanding is that the G lenses, which do not have an aperture ring, will still work on this camera. But since I don't have one, I can't test it, I can't demonstrate it. So if you have a G lens and this camera, please let me know in the comments section whether or not that's true, and if so, how to use a G lens on this camera. Now we're going to go into the PS settings. So we're going to hold down the PS button and rotate here over to PS. Now, the PS modes are these icons along the top, and they are Portrait, going left to right. They are Portrait, Hyperfocal, Landscape, Close-up, Sports, Silhouette, Night, and Motion. And here's what they do. Oops. Okay, so holding down the PS, we're going to go over to Portrait. Portrait gives you the largest aperture your lens can give you. So as you can see, as I rotate through the range, it's giving me the widest open aperture setting and changing the shutter speed accordingly to give you a nice shallow depth of field. And that's flattering for portraits because the shallow depth of field gives you the person's face in focus, but not the distracting background. In hyperfocal, we'll go here. Hyperfocal will give you the smallest aperture and a small aperture and a slow shutter. And portrait mode, I should say, is recommended for 80 to 100 millimeter lenses. Hyperfocal lenses are hyperfocal setting is recommended for 50 millimeter and wider lenses. 50 millimeter meaning 50, 35, 28, 24, wider meaning a lower number. And so what it does is it chooses a combination of small aperture and slow shutter speed. So the slowest shutter speed that you can reasonably hold the camera and the smallest aperture from that. Landscape mode. Here we go. Landscape gives you a small aperture and a slow shutter speed, and it turns off the flash. You cannot use a flash with landscape mode. Any lens will work with landscape mode. Any lens will work well with it. Close-up. Is that close-up? That looks like close-up. Is ideal for close-up shots. It uses a deeper aperture, as you can see here, f5.6. And it is recommended to use a tripod and macro lenses with this mode. Sports uses a fast shutter, the fastest it can give you, and a wide aperture, and that's good for freezing action. And the sports mode is ideally suited for 80 to 300 millimeter lenses. Silhouette mode meters off of the brightest spots in the image and uses a slow shutter speed, the slowest it can give you, and still give you a properly metered image based on the brightest points. And you can use this mode with any lens. Night mode gives you the slowest shutter speed that it can, a large aperture. It turns off the flash, and you need to use a tripod with it, or it's strongly recommended. It's recommended not to handhold it. You could put it on a bench or something stable like that. And again, with this, any lens will work well. Motion mode can make stationary images sharp and moving ones blurred. So a moving object can be blurred and a stationary object can be sharp. Or it can make a moving object sharp and stationary ones blurred if you are tracking. And so this is a good one if you've got a car coming in across the scene like this and you want the car to be in focus and the background to be blurry, you'll want to use this mode, and you can trap the car. You can trap the car's motion but keep the background blurry. Or vice versa, you can have the background in focus and the car blurry as it's coming across this scene. And this is recommended for 80 to 300 millimeter lenses. However, I would also suggest that this mode works well with 50 to 75 millimeter lenses if you don't have a tripod, and 80 millimeters and up. I strongly recommend using this mode with a tripod. Next thing we're going to do is look at the different metering modes. And so we're going to use function and select to switch through these. So function, well, first I want to get out of PS mode. And function set, going to go over to full manual. Now here's a metering mode. And you can see that it's blinking. There are going to be three symbols here: function, set. So it's a square with a bunch of black boxes, a square with a dot and some parentheses, and a square with a dot. Now those three symbols represent, respectively, matrix metering, which is got that symbol, center weighted metering, and spot metering. So with matrix metering, let's say that this image is what you want to take a picture of, what you're looking at right now. The camera will take all of the light coming off of this and it will build an exposure based on the readings of the entire image. With center weighted, it will take about 60% of the metering data off a center area about like that, and the remaining 40% will be from the rest of the image. With spot metering, the centermost part of where my thumb is represents 100% of the metering data. So let's take a look at what that would mean. With an averaging meter, this is what this scene would look like. Now, because it's very dark in the center, there would be a lot of darkness in the image, so the camera would tell you to expose it differently. Something a bit more like this. Because what's happening is the camera, no matter what it sees, always assumes that what it sees is either 12 or 18% gray, depending on how the camera is set up. And I don't know with this one whether it sees 12 or 18%. So if it sees something that's black, it thinks that should be gray. If it sees something that's white, it thinks that should be gray. If it sees something that's gray, it thinks that should be gray. So, and then if it was a spot metering, because the very center here is the hot shoe, and that's pretty bright, that would look a little bit more like this. So you can see how different metering modes will affect the way that your camera sees light and affect the way that it tells you to take the picture. So if you have a very dark area in the center, it's going to tell you to use a longer shutter speed with a wider aperture. Whereas if you have a light part in the middle where it's metering, it's going to tell you to use a fast shutter speed and a small aperture, because it wants to make that dark black and it wants to make that white gray. So you need to compensate a little bit if you're going to have different meter results. I will say that this camera's matrix meter is absolutely fantastic, and I actually never take it out of matrix mode because the matrix on it is so good that it consistently delivers very high quality results in the images because the meter works so well and so effectively. So that's metering. The next set of functions are going to be flash modes. So we're going to hit function, rotate function, hold it, rotate over here. Now set, and I'm going to scroll through the different options so you can see there's just tons and tons of them. This means your flash is just your standard flash. Like that, very bright. I have a mirror sitting up there and I really shouldn't have done that because now I got to kind of guess at what my script says. Great. Okay, so the various flash modes include standard flash, rear curtain, slow curtain, and red eye reduction, and red eye reduction. And so standard is the basic flash sync at 1/125th of a second. And we'll go through red eye, we'll go through the other way because I meant to go the other way. Red eye reduction flashes such that eyes do not appear to be red or glowing in images. Red eye with slow curtain sync allows you to use red eye reduction and a slow shutter sync speed like 1/30th or 5 seconds. The slow sync speed on this camera is anything less than 1/125th of a second and as slow as 30 seconds. That's what slow means. Is that if you have it set, if you want to take a picture with a flash, let's say you're out on vacation and your girlfriend or boyfriend is sitting in front of the Plaza de something or another in a scenic and awesome location, and it's well lit up and it's beautiful, and it's going to take a 3.5-second exposure to get all of those lights in the building, but you also want your girlfriend to appear in it, and if you just take it like that, she's going to be in the complete dark and it's not going to look good. But you've got your flash and your slow sync. So what you do, put your girlfriend where you want her, tell her sit there for 5 seconds because you want to have a little bit of extra time. Flash is going to go off, sit there for 5 seconds. So you set it to slow sync, set up your picture, take it, the flash is going to go off, and then the shutter will stay open for the rest of the exposure period, and then it will close. And what that does is allow you to have the person who's sitting over in front who needs the flash on them to be properly exposed, and as long as they sit motionless, they'll be fine after that. If they get up halfway through, then they'll look like a ghost walking through the image. But then they'll be properly exposed because of the flash, and then the background will be properly exposed because there will be more light that has hit the film. So that's what slow curtain is for. And slow curtain with red eye reduction eliminates red eye from those images. Rear curtain sync. Here it is. Rear curtain sync fires the flash at the end of the exposure. And so what happens is when you take a normal, let's say you have an exposure that's going to last 3 seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, just to make this easy. If you push the shutter button, it's going to go flash 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Rear means that it's going to be 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 flash, and exposure. Now what that means is that let's say you have a car coming through your image right here. Okay, it's going to take 3 seconds to get across the image. Shutter curtain opens, car drives, flash, shutter curtain closes. You're going to have a properly illuminated car here, and then the tail lights will be trailing off the back of it. Or if you have a bicycle coming through with its wheel and it's got lights on it, you'll get the light trail from here, flash, properly exposed cyclist on the bicycle here with spiraling light trails coming off of their bicycle. And so it allows you to have a lot of really nifty creative effects, and it's a pretty great thing that this camera has on it. So I'm going to go back to regular flash. Now, the next thing we've got is exposure compensation. Here we go. And that's this flashing icon. Exposure compensation will go from -5 to +5 stops in third stop increments. That is a very, very significant range. That's a 10-stop range. So it needs to be reset to 0 after you take your series of shots so that normal operation can resume. And you can see here, no compensation. And it just keeps going down to -5. And what this means is, let's say that you're at 0 compensation, and you look at the picture, you're looking at this image, and it says 1/250th of a second at f11. Okay, great, that's good to know. 1/500th, 1/1000th, 1/2000th, 1/4000th. Camera can't go any faster than that. Likewise, if you go the other direction, 1/250th, 1/125th, 1/60th, 1/30th, 1/15th, 1/8th. And so what happens is it allows you to control how much light is coming into your camera without altering the aperture. You can intentionally over or underexpose. Or if you know, here you're out in this bright white scene, you're out in a snowfield, and your camera thinks that this bright white snowfield is actually gray. But snow, you happen to know from experience, or because I'm about to tell you, is 2 to 3 stops brighter than gray, maybe as many as 5 stops brighter in bright sun. So, okay, great, it's snowing, wonderful. Well, now I've got properly, oops, gone the wrong way. So if you take a picture of snow right now, it's going to turn out gray. Now it's going to turn out white. So likewise, okay, here we are, we're standing in a tunnel. You're in a tunnel with your friends, and you want to get the darkness of the tunnel, but you know that if you were just to meter right now, the camera would tell you that this dark black tunnel is actually gray. So, okay, wrong way again. Now that dark black tunnel is actually going to be dark black, and that's what you want. So exposure compensation allows you to adjust your settings, specifically your shutter speed, so that you can achieve an image which is reflective of the way that your eyes are perceiving the scene instead of the way that the camera is perceiving the scene, because the camera will always think everything it sees is a flat gray, approximately the same color as the backdrop I'm using. The next mode we have is all mode exposure bracketing. And it's called all mode exposure bracketing because it brackets images in all the modes: program, aperture priority, shutter priority, and full manual. So what you need to do is what exposure bracketing does is it changes the exposures of each of the shots taken, and it does it in a bracket, meaning equal amount below and over, as well as properly exposed. And so it will take a 3-shot bracketed series, one that is underexposed, one that's properly exposed, and then one that is overexposed. So we're going to go in here, and right now it will take 3 shots. One will be 1/3 of a stop underexposed, one will be properly exposed, one will be 1/3 of a shot overexposed, a 1/2 stop in each direction under and over as well as properly exposed, 2/3 of a stop under and over as well as properly exposed, full stop, and there we go. It will go up to 1 full stop in each direction. And so that's okay. So I'm going to show you the exposure bracketing here really quickly, the auto bracketing. I'm going to do I'm going to do 1 stop in each direction. First shot will be 1 stop underexposed. And this shot will be perfectly exposed. So we can see here that it's changing the shutter speed for each of the exposures, not the aperture. Now at the top left of the LCD display, you can see the shutter speed. There we go, it's 1/60th. To the right of that is the aperture. Now one thing to bear in mind is that when you touch the shutter release, and for about 5 seconds afterward, the shutter speed and the aperture will be displayed. However, the shutter speed will continue to adapt automatically if you're in auto exposure mode, even if it is not displayed. So right now it's not displayed. If I'm in auto exposure mode, if I take the picture when it's not displayed, it will still change the shutter setting to whatever it needs to take, to whatever the shutter needs to be to take a properly exposed image. The film icon flashes when the film is loading, and that was up here by the battery. And the battery icon tells you approximately how much charge is left in your camera. Right now the batteries are basically full. The quick recall function over here is the out button. That's also quick recall. Quick recall has functions for changing the film advance mode, focusing area and mode, metering system and mode, flash sync, and exposure compensation. And all the different things we just talked about, or many of them. So what you want to do is you set up your own custom set of those settings for different scenarios. So if you know you're going to be shooting in snow and then back at the ski lodge as well, then you have one quick recall set up to compensate for the snow and one quick recall set up to compensate for the relative darkness in the ski lodge. And also, if you have one set of functions that you find you typically use, certain shutter speed or a certain aperture, then you can program those into a quick recall and always have up to 3 quick recalls ready to go. I actually don't have any programmed into my camera. And QR mode 0, so there's actually 4 you can see. There's QR mode 0, 1, 2, 3, 0. QR mode 0 will always be the factory default settings. Single frame, wide focus area, single servo AF, matrix metering, auto multi-program mode, and normal flash sync. And then you just manually set the other 3. To set or memorize a QR mode, make sure that all of your settings are as you want them. So I'm going to switch over here to QR1. I'm going to go to Aperture-priority Mode, and I'm going to change it, and it's set on high. So that's what I want. Next, I'm going to hold the in button and rotate the command dial to either 1, 2, or 3. And when I've selected the correct slot, so in this, now I'm set at 0. I'm set at dash. Now I'm set at 1. Okay, so now I want it saved in 1. Now I remove my finger from in, and 1 will now be different from 2. And that's how you set it. Set up all your modes that you want, hold in, rotate to the QR, rotate from the hyphen to the QR number you want, and release in. And that's how you program a quick recall mode. To get to it, you just hit out and rotate to the number that you want. Okay. So here we are looking through the viewfinder. All right. And I'm going to show you basically what we're seeing here. There is that large circular ring in the middle, and that is your center weighted averaging metering ring. So when you have the mode, the camera set to center weighted averaging, what is inside that ring is what will be metered. There's a small circular ring there now to the lower left. That's your spot metering mode. So when you have it in spot metering, only what's in the small ring will be metered. Now along the bottom here, you can see different settings. Now the left tells you your autofocus mode. Then the little dot is your metering mode. So right now I'm in spot metering, is what it's telling me. A means aperture priority. If you were in shutter priority, it would say S, or M for full manual, or PS for one of the PS modes. 60 is your shutter speed, 1/60th of a second, and F8 is the aperture, F8. And so that's what you're getting when you look through the viewfinder. That's the data that it gives you. And that concludes the second video on the Nikon N70. Stick around for a minute, you'll get to see some photos I've taken with this exact camera, and you'll get to see that this is a stunning performer. This camera takes great photos. And if this video was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know I'm going in the right direction and that I'm producing content which is useful to you. If you have questions, please post them in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about getting back to you fairly quickly. If you have suggestions for future videos, let me know. If I have the equipment and the technical know-how, I'm more than happy to film those for you. And one last thing, thank you guys for watching.